American Predators, Chapter 1, 2017, Stumps America. Quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Unquote. Robert Figueroa stopped the stolen Nissan Surus taxi on the bank of the Rio Grande under the cover of darkness. He looked north across the river at Texas and what he hoped would be a new life. The cartel had taken everything from him, his business, his savings, his car. Now they were threatening his and his family's lives. Mexico was no longer safe for them. They had no choice but to run for the border. He knew of people who had made it to America and started new lives. He saw their joyful posts on social media, new cars and big houses, healthy children going to good schools. Roberto wanted nothing more than to provide for his family and for his children to grow up happy. He felt like less of a man that he was having to escape his home country, but the situation had become beyond his control. Roberto pulled a rope out of the trunk. He tied one end around his waist. Next, he tied it to the waist of his son Oscar, a solemn 4-year-old who idolized his father. Oscar was big for his age, but still a tiny little nothing compared to the raging Rio Grande. Once Oscar was secured to the rope, Roberto reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn and flattened beer bottle cap. "Take this for luck, hijo. It's always kept me safe," he lied. He'd been holding that bottle cap for many years, since he quit drinking to save his marriage. At the time, Roberto thought it would be the hardest thing he'd ever have to do. Since he'd quit, he'd been blessed with a thriving business and 2 beautiful children. Everything had been going well until he'd bought himself a flashy BMW. Once the cartel saw him driving that around, they never left him alone. They taxed his business to death. If he didn't pay for their protection, they would destroy his property and kidnap his employees. Help your sister, Oscar. Oscar's twin sister, Montserrat, was struggling with the rope. Her mother, Vanessa Figueroa, took it from her hands. "Here, let me, hija. This rope will keep us safe from being separated." She carefully pulled it around Montserrat's middle, making sure it wasn't too tight. Then she put the end of the rope around herself. Her daughter was looking doubtfully from the rope to the roiling river, then back up at her mother. Vanessa reached around her own neck and took off her prized shark-tooth necklace. She put the necklace around her daughter's neck, careful not to tangle it in her wild, curly hair. "You have always had the heart of a lion, my dearest. Now you have the tooth of a shark. We will be safe, I promise." Now that they were all connected by the rope, Roberto pulled an inflated inner tube from the open trunk. He put the inner tube over top of the twins so they were encircled by it. "Whatever you do, don't let go of this tube. It will keep you afloat no matter what happens." They left the still-running taxi behind, with the trunk and doors still open. It had served its purpose. They shuffled down the bank to the rushing Black River. It wasn't an ideal time of year to cross the Rio Grande, as it was spring and the water was fast. But the cartel did not care. Roberto's hand was forced. He led his young family to the water's edge. He walked up to his waist. The water was frigid. He took a deep breath and said, "It's really not too bad," to reassure everyone. They looked dubious, but followed him in. The buoyant tube kept the children afloat. Their eyes were like big blue saucers, full of fear and doubt. Roberto and Vanessa held onto the tube and pushed it and the children out into the deep, fast water. They were committed now. The inky black water pushed them along parallel to the bank. Roberto watched the taxi disappear behind them as he and Vanessa kicked as hard as they could across the strong current of the river. He turned his head around to look to the north bank and their new life. It was shrouded in mist and darkness, but he knew it was there. God helps those who help themselves, he told himself, and he kicked with everything he had. The children hugged each other in the semi-reassuring confines of the inner tube. The teeth chattered as they tried to kick and help their parents propel the flimsy craft across the wide expanse of the river. Roberto had chosen this spot to cross because it showed as fairly narrow on the map, but what looked like a simple crossing on paper was in fact a surging torrent of spring runoff. The mountains had gotten lots of snow this winter, so the Rio swelled its banks and the water was full of flotsam. As they reached the middle of the river, they were hit by a large tree that was being pushed downstream by the strong current. Fortunately, they were moving nearly as fast as it, so they were unhurt. Roberto got his feet on the log and pushed them away from it and towards the Texas side. He was starting to feel optimistic. They were only a few hundred feet from America. This was going to work. He could feel it. The family kicked and got slowly closer to the opposite bank. Roberto thought about what he would do in America. He would find a job as fast as he could. He didn't care what, so long as he could feed his family. He just needed a start. Eventually he'd be able to start up another landscaping business and rebuild their lives. All he needed was a chance. He imagined the pride he would feel when he hired his first American employee. As they neared the Texas side of the river, a powerful spotlight blinded them. A voice on a bullhorn shouted at them from behind the light. "You are entering the USA illegally and will be placed under arrest." A Zodiac inflatable boat came roaring towards them, and rough hands pulled them into the boat. Light reflected off badges and weapons. The voice taunted them. "You'll live to regret this, amigo." The boat docked, and they were shuffled onto dry land. The rope was cut off of them while guns were pointed at their heads. The children were yanked out of the inner tube and dragged away. Vanessa screamed, and Roberto tried to grab for their children, receiving a rifle butt to the jaw for his trouble. His world went black. He came to hours later. He and Vanessa were locked in a cell with dozens of other hopeless-looking illegal immigrants. Oscar and Montserrat were nowhere to be seen. Questions to the guards about their children were met with stony stares and silence. Roberto felt total regret. He'd been trying to save his family. Now he'd lost them. Your requests for asylum are denied, and you have been found guilty of illegally entering America. You are sentenced to being deported back to your home country. The judge's gavel fell, and the sound was like a shot to Vanessa and Roberto's hearts. "Your Honor, what about our children?" Vanessa asked while holding back tears. "Your children have been taken into custody by the Office of Refugee Resettlement in accordance with the policies of the Stump administration. Let this be a lesson to you for coming here illegally." Vanessa and Roberto stared at the impassive judge in horror. In short order, they were loaded onto a bus with many other convicted illegal immigrants and driven back to the Mexican border. The bus stopped after crossing a bridge over the Rio Grande and dumped them all off. A uniformed border guard shouted at the group, "If any of you are thinking of trying to enter the U.S. illegally again, you should know there's more than a good chance that you get shot for trying. Our new president, Donald Stump, doesn't want you here and doesn't much care how we keep you out." Roberto hugged Vanessa close. "I'm so sorry, Vanessa. I've ruined us. The cartel has taken away all his material possessions, and now Stump's America had taken away his children. Don't lose hope, my love. You are a good father. This is not your fault." Montserrat and Oscar were placed on a bus full of other children that had been taken from illegal immigrants. It was a special bus outfitted with child safety seats expressly for this purpose. They were driven to Karnes County Residential Center, where they would be held in a warehouse-style facility until a sponsor family could be found to take them. Montserrat and Oscar looked different from many of the other Mexican and Central American children surrounding them. They had blue eyes and blonde hair, just like their mother Vanessa. This isn't uncommon in Mexico City, where they were born, as there is much Spanish blood still in that area, dating back to the Spanish occupation of Mexico in the 1500s. This marked the children out among their peers in the residential center. Some of the other children attempted to bully them, but Oscar had none of it. He may have only been 4 years old, but he was already walking on his hind legs. It didn't take long for a sponsor to come along that wanted to give them a home. A roly-poly white couple from Arizona took them. Marjorie Saunders, the matriarch of the family, was a huge fan of the show Toddlers and Tiaras, and she had stars in her eyes the second she looked at Montserrat. When they got home to Phoenix, Marjorie decided the kids needed new American-sounding names. With no thought to the irony, she chose to name them after Britain's newest prince and princess, Harry and Meghan Markle. So now Oscar was known as Harry, and Montserrat was called Markle. The kids took them in stride, as the bewildering changes in their lives had made them numb. They missed their parents terribly and often woke up crying. They constantly had nightmares about the night they were stolen from Roberto and Vanessa. Marjorie and her husband, Bob, tried to be understanding, but it bothered them. They decided to get the kids enrolled in different activities to take their mind off of things. For Harry, they decided on karate class, which he took to like a duck to water. The discipline seemed to appeal to him, and the exercise wore him out so that he slept through the night, clutching his father's bottle cap. For Markle, though, it would be the toddler beauty pageant circuit that Marjorie had always dreamed of competing in. This would have mixed results. Markle enjoyed playing dress-up as much as any little girl, but the extremes of Marjorie's ambitions for her would eventually take it to disturbing places. At these pageants, Marjorie would put heavy makeup on Markle and dress her in princess costumes, or whatever costume the event required. There would be many photographers at these pageants. Markle soon made a name for herself playing up to the cameras. She loved having her picture taken. Marjorie was delighted when photographers offered to pay for private photo shoots with her little model. Soon there were pictures of Markle all over the web in all manner of costumes and poses. It didn't take long at all for her to gain the attention of the dark web, a place where pedophiles and child pornographers roam free. Once there, Markle's pretty face was soon photoshopped onto naked bodies. This would placate the perverts for a while, but eventually they'd come looking for her in the flesh. Marjorie and Bob were oblivious. They were just happy to have a little money maker under their roof.